Good morning, it's Mr. Michelin here, and this is a video on asexual reproduction. So in this video we're going to go through what is asexual reproduction, what does it mean, and then have a look at some of the various different forms of asexual reproduction and what organisms use this method to produce. So let's kick off first with what is asexual reproduction. And in an earlier video, we did sort of mention what it is, and it's different color pen. There we go. So reproduction that occurs, I suppose, when an organism sort of reproduces by itself. So reproduction that occurs when an organism reproduces by itself. Now, there are a couple of different advantages and disadvantages to being able to reproduce by yourself. Obviously, if you don't need to find a partner in which to do it with, that makes things a little bit easier. However, the offspring that are produced, so offspring that are produced are identical to parent. Okay, so any offspring that are produced through asexual reproduction are identical to the parent, which can be fair enough. It can also be that can be quite a disadvantage because you're not picking up anything new. One of the really great things about sexual reproduction is the chance to pick up a new trait or something that can make you stronger. Whereas with asexual reproduction, you don't get that chance. Okay? So asexual reproduction is reproduction that occurs when an organism reproduces by itself, and we're going to go through some of the different types of asexual reproduction. So we're going to start off with vegetative propagation. Okay, so vegetative propagation is mainly talking about certain plant varieties. So you can have bulbs. So for example, an onion is a bulb. So a bulb is just, I suppose, a packet where a plant has stored all of its food resources, a lot of its energy, a lot of its water. And so you can take that out of the ground like an onion or garlic or daffodils and certain other types of plants, so onions, garlic, daffodils. So you can take, so for example, you can take out an onion, you can, cut the green stuff off the top and you can eat it, or, if you leave it around for too long, you can actually replant it and you can make another onion plant. Same with garlic. Tubers are very similar in that regard. So you can take, so for example, this is a potato that's been left out in the sun just a bit too long, and it is starting to regrow small shoots to become a new potato plant. So tubers includes potatoes, sweet potatoes and things, carrots, where once again, if you for example, if you take a potato that you can eat and make chips out of and everything else, if you cut it in half and bury it and then, water it and put fertilizer on it, after a while you will make a new potato plant. And if you pull that potato plant out, there'll be lots of potatoes that you can now pick and you can put away, and then you can, replant another potato. That's what Matt Damon does in the movie The Martian. He actually makes potato plants because he understands that if he cuts a potato in half and plants it, he can make many more potatoes. So that's an example of tubers. So tubers, once again, are like a packet of energy that the plant has, or it's like a small packet where the plant is storing away energy, water, resources that it can utilize later on. We can also have cuttings. So if you get a rose bush, and if you ever look very carefully here, you can see that this person here has, and these are roses because you can see little thorns, but they've taken some cuttings from a rose bush. So what they've done is, if this was the rose, or a branch of the rose bush, they've cut it here. And then what they do is they take this cutting and they replant the cutting. And after a while, if you've, watered it and all the right things, after a while, what will happen is that this cutting will start to grow its own roots, and you'll get another rose bush. You have to plant a few because some of them won't take, but some of them will, and you'll end up with a brand new rose bush. So quite often, if your parents grow roses, you might have someone come along one day and just want a cutting, so they'll just take one branch, they'll cut it, shove it in the ground, and hopefully make a new plant. You can also have what are called runners. So strawberries, and so let me put roses over here. So strawberries, if you have a strawberry bush, what will happen is it will start to send out these little runners, which I suppose are like small little stems, and they'll reach across the ground and they will then they'll actually start to grow another little root system, as you can see here, so new roots, and then another plant will start to grow from this location here. So starting with one, and then it sort of branches out and then grows a completely new plant here. So if you were to cut this, you would have 1, 2 completely new plants. So it's like the plant sends out like a little bit of rope and then reattaches itself and then grows another plant. And that's how you get runners. Very particular types of weeds do this as well, which makes them frighteningly annoying. If you've ever done weeding before and you've picked up a weed and it seems to be anchored at lots of different points by these little ropes that it's sent out, that's a runner as well. So we have vegetative propagation. So we have bulbs, cuttings, tubers, and runners. Bulbs and tubers, that's why you've got to keep onions and potatoes in the dark, because if you don't, they start to sprout. We can have spores as well. So what a mushroom or toadstools or different types of mold, what they will do is, if you turn like a mushroom over, you'll see all these little holes in the mushroom cap, and that's where all these spores have been created and then released. So a spore is a group of unspecialized cells. It's a group of unspecialized body cells in a nutrient-rich packet. And so when the time is right, the mushroom will just release its spores. The spores fall. They, implant either in the ground or, on some rotting material, because that's where you find mushrooms. And they'll grow into a new mushroom. That's why when you find mushrooms, you tend to find them all growing on top of each other, like this. If this was the original mushroom, then it's dropped its spores, and the spores just drop very close, very locally, and that will then turn into more mushrooms. So that's spores. We have binary fission, which we've covered in cells, but just to very quickly go over, remember, binary fission is done by very, very simple organisms. So spores are mushrooms. Binary fission is like bacteria. So the nuclear material splits, then the cell gets larger and then begins to split, and you end up with two identical daughter cells. So we've done this. We have budding. So in your textbook in the notes, it all talks about budding by what are known as Hydra, which is not the evil organization, which is the evil organization in Marvel, but a Hydra is actually a type of worm that has many heads. Okay, so a Hydra is a multi-headed worm, and what it does is it sort of grows like a small little pimple that develops into like a bigger version of itself, and then that version, once it gets sufficiently big, actually breaks off and becomes another individual. Okay, so imagine you had a pimple that grew into a very small version of you, and then it was like a perfectly formed miniature version, and then it detached itself and then grew up into a bigger version of you. That's budding. We also see budding on trees. If you look at fruit trees, if you actually have a look at the branches, you'll notice they've got these little bumps and things on them. And these little bumps, sometimes they'll start to grow little green shoots like this. Well, these are buds. Okay, these are small little buds. And if you want to encourage the buds to grow, what you need to do is you need to cut sort of the branch sort of here. Like what this person's done, this would have started off as just like a little pimple sort of thing. And now it's actually starting to grow into a brand new plant. So that's budding. And the last type that we're going to have a look at is what's known as parthenogenesis. So parthenogenesis is when unfertilized eggs. So far everything that we've looked at is for plants, for certain types of plants, and look, binary fission is used by bacteria, and spores are used by fungus. Fungus are not plants, just so we are all aware. Parthenogenesis is something that certain animals can actually do, or certain insects as well. So unfertilized eggs develop into offspring. Offspring are female and identical to parent. So we see parthenogenesis quite frequently in bees. So the queen bee lays a whole lot of eggs, and they are unfertilized. They're unfertilized eggs, and they will grow into the worker bees, and all the worker bees are effectively sisters. They are all identical to each other, and they are all female, but they also cannot reproduce. I think because the queen sends out like a pheromone or a chemical that prevents that from happening. But yeah, so bees reproduce through parthenogenesis. The queen lays unfertilized eggs. Same in the case of ants. Unfertilized eggs are laid, and they can develop into offspring, but all the offspring will be identical and they'll all be female. Now that's not to say that they only reproduce that way, but for the most part they do. A couple of years ago it was observed that a particular Komodo dragon in a zoo in Asia somewhere also reproduced through parthenogenesis. There was this solitary female, and one day it laid eggs and it had baby Komodo dragons. So it's not unheard of to occur in things like lizards and in certain fish species as well. So that is asexual reproduction. Thank you.